The stars looked cold and distant through the bridge windows of the USS Liberty as Captain Jake Morrison stood watching the darkness of space. 3 years of war had made him tired, but he still carried himself like the soldier he was born to be. His brown hair showed gray at the temples now, and his green eyes had seen too much death. The war against the Zephyrian Empire had taken everything from humanity and still demanded more. Lieutenant Amanda Clark walked up behind him with a data pad in her hands. She was young for her rank, but the war had promoted many people fast. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, and her blue eyes showed the same weariness that all soldiers carried now. The Liberty was heading toward the Kepler system, where intelligence said Zephyrian ships had been seen moving supplies. Roy Chen sat at the communication station running scans of nearby space. He was good at his job and had saved the ship more times than anyone could count. His black hair was always messy, and he wore thick glasses that made his dark eyes look bigger. The crew trusted him to hear danger coming before anyone else could. The Liberty was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was one of the fastest. Jake had commanded it for 2 years and knew every sound it made. The crew of 300 people had become like family to him. They all knew the war was not going well for humanity. Earth had lost too many colonies and too many good people. Amanda handed Jake the datapad and pointed at the screen. Enemy ships were moving in formation near the 4th planet in the system. Jake looked at the numbers and felt his stomach tighten. There were more Zephyrian vessels than intelligence had reported. The aliens had been planning something big. Roy suddenly turned from his station with worry on his face. He had intercepted a message that made no sense. The Zephyrian fleet was not attacking anything. They were just waiting in space, like they wanted to be found. Jake told Roy to scan again, but the readings stayed the same. The Zephyrians were tall beings with blue skin that looked like it was made of crystal. They could speak to each other with their minds and had technology that humans still did not understand. Their ships were beautiful and deadly, with curves that looked more like art than weapons. But they had been killing humans for 3 years, and Jake had learned not to trust anything about them. Amanda suggested they call for backup, but Jake knew no other ships were close enough to help. They had orders to patrol this area and gather intelligence. If they ran away now, the Zephyrians might disappear again, and the chance to learn something important would be lost. Jake made the decision to move closer but stay ready to fight or run. The Liberty crept through space using its stealth systems to hide from enemy sensors. The crew was nervous, but they trusted their captain. Jake had brought them through worse situations before. As they got closer, Roy picked up something that made him call out in surprise. The largest Zephyrian ship was sending a message directly to the Liberty. It was not a threat or a demand to surrender. The aliens wanted to talk. Jake stared at the message on his screen and read it 3 times. Queen Lyrelai herself was aboard that ship, and she wanted to meet with him face to face. The Queen was the ruler of the entire Zephyrian Empire and the most dangerous enemy humanity had ever faced. She had never spoken directly to any human before. Amanda thought it was a trap, but Jake was not so sure. The Queen could have destroyed the Liberty already if she wanted to. Her ship was 10 times bigger and had weapons that could turn the Liberty into space dust in seconds. Why ask for a meeting when she could just attack? The message said the Queen would come to a neutral space station between their ships. She would bring only a small guard and expected Jake to do the same. The meeting would be about ending the war that had killed millions on both sides. Jake called a meeting with his senior officers in the briefing room. Amanda still believed it was a trap, but Roy had been studying Zephyrian communications for months. He said their language had words for honor and truth that seemed very important to them. Maybe the Queen really did want to talk about peace. The decision was hard, but Jake knew he had to try. Too many people had died already, and the war was slowly killing both sides. If there was even a small chance for peace, he had to take it. He sent a message back saying he would meet with the Queen, but only if both sides agreed to hold fire during the talks. The Queen agreed immediately and suggested they meet on Station Alpha 7, which was an old trading post that nobody used anymore. Jake picked Amanda and Roy to come with him, along with 2 Marines for protection. The rest of the crew would wait on the Liberty and be ready to fight if things went wrong. As Jake prepared for the most important meeting of his life, he wondered what kind of being Queen Lyrelai really was. Human intelligence said she was beautiful even by human standards, but also completely ruthless in battle. She had personally led attacks that destroyed human colonies and killed thousands of innocent people. The shuttle trip to Station Alpha 7 took 2 hours, and Jake spent the time thinking about what he would say. How do you talk to someone who has been your enemy for 3 years? What could the Queen possibly want that would be worth this risk? When they reached the station, Jake saw that the Queen had already arrived. Her shuttle was sleek and silver-like. Liquid metal formed into the shape of a bird. It was beautiful and alien and somehow frightening at the same time. Jake took a deep breath and prepared to meet the enemy who might hold the key to saving both their peoples. Jake had never seen anything like Queen Lyrelei before in his life. She stood nearly 7 feet tall with skin that seemed to glow with soft blue light. Her silver hair moved like it was underwater, and her eyes were the color of deep space. She wore robes that looked like they were made from starlight itself, and when she spoke, her voice had music in it. But what shocked Jake most was not how she looked, but what she said. The Queen stood in the middle of the old station with her 2 guards behind her and looked directly at him. Her words were clear and simple. She wanted to marry him. Marriage was the only way her people would accept peace with humans. Jake felt like the station was spinning around him. Amanda stepped closer to his side, and Roy made a small sound of surprise. The Queen explained that Zephyrian culture required a bond of marriage to make any treaty real. Without this sacred union, her people would never trust humans enough to end the war. The Queen told Jake that she had studied him for months. Human prisoners had spoken about his honor and fairness. Even enemy soldiers respected him because he treated captives well and never broke his word. This was why she chose him from all the human commanders. Jake found his voice and asked why marriage was so important to her people. Queen Lyrelei explained that Zephyrians could join minds with their mates. This made lies impossible between married couples. A marriage between their leaders would prove that both sides really wanted peace. The meeting lasted 3 hours, and Jake learned more about the enemy than 3 years of war had taught him. The Queen was not just a ruler, but also a mother who had lost her own child in the fighting. She was tired of war, just like Jake was tired of sending young soldiers to die. When the meeting ended, Queen Lyrelei gave Jake 7 days to make his decision. She warned him that if he said no, the war would continue with even more violence than before. Her people were getting angry about the talks, and some wanted to destroy Earth completely. The trip back to the Liberty felt like it took forever. Amanda sat beside Jake in the shuttle, and neither of them spoke. Roy kept checking his instruments like he expected enemy ships to attack at any moment. But Jake was thinking about the Queen's words and the weight of millions of lives on his shoulders. Back on the Liberty, Jake called his senior officers together. The news spread quickly through the ship, and soon everyone knew about the Queen's offer. Some crew members thought Jake should accept right away if it meant peace. Others believed it was a trick to capture their captain and leave humanity without one of its best leaders. Amanda was the strongest voice against the marriage. She had served with Jake for 2 years and respected him more than any person alive. But she could not accept that he should sacrifice his life to alien demands. It felt wrong to trade their captain like he was just another piece of equipment. Roy had a different view. He had been studying Zephyrian culture and language since the war began. Marriage was sacred to them in ways humans could barely understand. If the Queen was willing to bond with a human, it meant she really wanted lasting peace, not just a temporary ceasefire. Jake knew he had to contact Earth Command, but the message would take hours to reach home, and hours more for a reply to come back. Time was running short, and he needed to decide soon. The Queen had made it clear that her offer would not stay open forever. Admiral Helen Price was the head of Earth's military forces and had been Jake's mentor for many years. When the message finally reached her, she called an emergency meeting of all the top commanders. The debate went on for hours with no clear answer. Some admirals thought Jake should accept the marriage to buy time for Earth to build more ships and weapons. Others believed it was surrender disguised as diplomacy. A few suggested that Jake might be able to learn Zephyrian secrets if he got close to their queen. While Earth Command argued about what to do, Jake watched the stars from his quarters. He had joined the military to protect people, not to become a political symbol. But war had made him into something more than just a soldier. His decisions affected the lives of everyone on Earth and all the human colonies. During the waiting period, something unexpected happened. Queen Lyrelai ordered her fleets to pull back from 3 human systems. She also allowed supply ships to reach colonies that had been under siege for months. These actions showed that she was serious about peace, but they also revealed how powerful the Zephyrian Empire really was. Jake realized that the aliens had been holding back their full strength during the war. If they wanted to destroy humanity, they probably could have done it already. The Queen's offer might be the only chance to save his people from complete defeat. Roy brought Jake intelligence reports about Queen Lyrelai herself. She was not just a figurehead, but a brilliant military leader who had won every battle she fought. Her own people respected her, but some high-ranking nobles were angry about her peace talks. If she married a human, she might lose her throne. This information changed how Jake saw the situation. The Queen was taking as big a risk as he was. She could lose everything if her people decided she had betrayed them by marrying an enemy. But she was still willing to try because she believed peace was worth any price. As the 7 days passed, Jake found himself thinking about the Queen more and more. During their meeting, he had seen sadness in her strange eyes. She had lost people. She loved just like he had. The war had hurt both sides in ways that might never heal. On the 6th day, Jake made his decision. He would accept the Queen's offer, but only with conditions of his own. If she wanted him as a husband, then she would have to accept him as an equal partner, not just a symbol of surrender. Jake sent his answer to Queen Lyrelai and prepared to change the course of history. He did not know if he was saving humanity or dooming it, but he knew he had to try. The alternative was watching the war destroy everything he had sworn to protect. Jake requested another meeting with Queen Lyrelai before giving his final answer. This time he wanted to talk privately, without guards or advisors watching their every move. The Queen agreed and suggested they meet on a small asteroid station. That was completely neutral territory. The asteroid station was barely big enough for 2 shuttles and had only basic life support systems. Jake brought only Amanda and Roy while the Queen came with just 1 advisor. The meeting room was small and cold, but it gave them the privacy they needed to speak honestly. Jake looked across the table at Queen Lyrelai and saw her differently than during their first meeting. She seemed smaller somehow and more human despite her alien appearance. Her glowing skin was dimmer, and her silver eyes showed the same tiredness that Jake felt in his own bones. The Queen began by telling Jake about her previous mate who had died in the early days of the war. His name was Kale, and they had been bonded for 20 years. They had 1 child together named Zara, who was only 16 when she died. Their transport ship was carrying refugees away from a battle zone when human forces attacked it by mistake. Jake felt pain in his chest as he listened to her story. He remembered that battle and the reports afterward. Command had listed the ship as a military transport carrying weapons. No one knew there were families aboard until it was too late. Jake had been the one who wrote the report explaining the mistake, but words on paper could not bring back the dead. Queen Lyrelai saw the recognition in Jake's eyes and nodded slowly. She had known he was involved in her family's death, but she did not blame him personally. War made killers of good people on both sides. Her mate and daughter would not want their deaths to fuel more hatred and violence. For the first time, Jake understood that the Queen was not his enemy, but another victim of the same war that had taken his brother. She had lost everything, just like he had, but she was still trying to find a way to stop the killing. This took a kind of courage that Jake was only beginning to understand. The Queen explained more about Zephyrian marriage customs and what the bonding process would mean. When 2 Zephyrians joined in marriage, their minds became connected in ways that humans might find frightening. They could feel each other's emotions and share thoughts across great distances. Jake asked if the bond would work between human and Zephyrian minds. Queen Lyrelai admitted that no one knew for sure since it had never been tried before. The connection might be weaker than normal, or it might not work at all. But even the attempt would prove to her people that both sides were serious about peace. The conversation lasted for hours as they shared stories about their lives before the war. Jake learned that Queen Lyrelai had once been a teacher who loved music and poetry. She became a military leader only because her people needed someone to guide them through the crisis. Leading armies into battle was not something she enjoyed, but something she accepted as her duty. Jake told her about his childhood on Earth and his dreams of exploring space peacefully instead of fighting wars. He had wanted to be a scientist like his father, but joined the military when the Zephyrians first attacked human colonies. His brother had been a doctor who died trying to save wounded civilians during a battle. As they talked, Jake began to see patterns in how the war had started. Both sides had made mistakes, and both sides had suffered losses that made forgiveness seem impossible. But holding on to anger and hatred was only creating more pain for everyone involved. Queen Lirelei offered to let Jake experience a temporary mental connection so he could understand her true intentions. The process was dangerous for both of them, because human minds were not designed for telepathic contact. If something went wrong, it could damage their thoughts permanently. Jake agreed, despite the risks, because he needed to know if he could trust her. The Queen placed her hands on either side of his head, and her skin began to glow brighter. Jake felt a strange, tingling sensation, and then suddenly he could sense her thoughts and emotions directly. The experience was overwhelming at first. Jake could feel the Queen's grief over her lost family and her desperate hope that peace might still be possible. He sensed her fear that her own people might reject her for seeking alliance with humans. Most of all, he felt her genuine desire to end the war before it destroyed both their civilizations. Through the connection, Jake also experienced how the Queen saw him. To her, he represented the best qualities of humanity, including honor, determination, and the ability to make hard choices for the greater good. She had chosen him not as a symbol of defeat, but as a partner who could help build something better than war. The mental link lasted only a few minutes, but it changed everything Jake thought he knew about his enemy. When the connection ended, he sat quietly for a long time, processing what he had experienced. Queen Lirelei watched him with concern, hoping the contact had not caused any damage. Jake finally spoke and told the Queen that he would accept her marriage proposal. But he had conditions that she would need to agree to before they could proceed. He would be an equal partner in any decisions affecting both their peoples. Human colonies would keep their independence and cultural traditions. Most importantly, they would work together to build lasting peace instead of just ending the current war. Queen Lirelei listened to his conditions and agreed to all of them without argument. She had hoped for a true partnership from the beginning and was glad that Jake understood the importance of working together. The marriage would be real in every sense, not just a political arrangement. As they prepared to leave the asteroid station, Jake felt something he had not experienced in 3 years of fighting. For the first time since the war began, he had hope that the future might be better than the past. The Queen had shown him that enemies could become allies if they were brave enough to try understanding instead of hatred. The journey back to their ships felt different than the trip out. Jake knew his life was about to change in ways he could not imagine, but he was ready to face whatever came next. Queen Lirelei had given him a chance to save both their peoples, and he would not waste that opportunity. The wedding between Jake Morrison and Queen Lirelei was planned to take place on Harmony Station, which was a neutral world that neither humans nor Zephyrians had claimed. The ceremony would combine traditions from both cultures and be broadcast across space so everyone could witness this historic moment. Jake stood in front of a mirror in his quarters, adjusting his dress military uniform. The blue fabric was crisp and clean with gold buttons that reflected the light. On his chest were the medals he had earned during 3 years of war, including the Star of Valor that he received for saving a colony from destruction. Amanda knocked on his door and entered when he called for her to come in. She looked worried and had been trying to convince Jake to change his mind right up until the last moment. She still believed the marriage was too dangerous and that Jake was risking everything for a peace that might not last. Roy was waiting in the hallway with a small box containing something special. Inside was Jake's father's wedding ring, which had been sent from Earth along with messages of support from his family. His mother had written that she was proud of him for choosing peace over war, even though it meant he would have to live far from home. The shuttle flight to Harmony Station took 2 hours, and Jake spent the time thinking about what his life would be like after the ceremony. He would no longer be just a human military officer, but the husband of an alien queen and a symbol of hope for both their peoples. The responsibility felt heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Harmony Station was beautiful with gardens and fountains that had been built by traders from a dozen different worlds. The ceremony hall was large enough to hold representatives from both species, and the walls were covered with flowers that glowed softly in the dim light. Queen Lyrelay was already waiting when Jake arrived, and he stopped breathing for a moment when he saw her. She wore traditional Zephyrian ceremonial robes that seemed to capture starlight itself, and her silver hair was arranged in an intricate pattern that meant new beginnings in her culture. The ceremony began with prayers in both languages asking for blessings on the union that would join two peoples who had been enemies for too long. Jake repeated vows that had been translated from ancient Zephyrian texts, while Lyrelay spoke promises in perfect English that she had learned just for this moment. When it came time for the bonding ritual, Jake felt nervous about what would happen. Lyrelay took his hands in hers, and their skin began to glow where they touched. Jake felt the same tingling sensation as before, but this time it was stronger and lasted much longer. The mental connection formed slowly at first, like a river finding its way to the sea. Jake could sense Lyrelay's thoughts and emotions while she experienced his human determination and courage. The bond was unlike anything either of them had felt before, because it combined human and Zephyrian minds in ways that had never been tested. Just as the ceremony reached its most important moment, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Ships were attacking from two different directions, and both human and Zephyrian forces were involved. Jake and Lyrelay looked at each other through their new mental link, and immediately understood what was happening. A group of Zephyrian nobles, led by Lord Commander Vex, had decided that the Queen was betraying her people by marrying a human. They had brought warships to stop the wedding and remove Lyrelay from power. At the same time, human extremists, commanded by Colonel Frank Stone, were attacking because they believed Jake was surrendering to the enemy. The rebels from both sides had coordinated their attack to happen during the ceremony when security would be focused on the wedding instead of watching for threats. They planned to capture or kill both Jake and Lyrelay and restart the war with even more violence than before. Jake and Lyrelay did not panic despite the danger because their new mental bond let them work together in perfect coordination. Jake used his military training to organize the defense of the station, while Lyrelay commanded her loyal ships to protect the wedding guests and civilians. Amanda and Roy helped Jake set up defensive positions throughout the station, while Lyrelay's advisor coordinated with Zephyrian forces that remained loyal to their queen. The fighting was fierce but brief because the rebels had not expected their targets to work together so effectively. The human extremists were defeated when Jake used his knowledge of their tactics to predict their attacks. He had trained some of these officers himself and knew how they would try to take the station. Lyrelay's rebels were stopped when she used the royal command codes to turn their own ships against them. During the battle, Jake felt something amazing through his bond with Lyrelay. He could sense her thoughts and she could feel his emotions, which let them coordinate their actions without speaking out loud. They moved like partners who had been working together for years, instead of enemies who had just met. When the fighting ended, both Jake and Lyrelay were wounded, but not seriously hurt. More importantly, their victory had proven to everyone watching that human and Zephyrian forces could work together successfully. The wedding had become a symbol of cooperation instead of just a political arrangement. The ceremony was completed after the station was secure, and Jake and Lyrelay exchanged rings that had been designed to represent the joining of their two peoples. Jake wore a band made from Zephyrian crystal, while Lyrelay received a ring forged from earth metals by human craftsmen. The celebration that followed included music and dancing from both cultures. Jake was amazed to see human and Zephyrian guests, talking and laughing together like they had been friends instead of enemies. The mental bond he shared with Lyrelay let him feel her joy at seeing their peoples beginning to understand each other. Late that night, Jake and Lyrelay stood together on the observation deck looking out at the stars. Their ships were docked side by side, and crews from both vessels were working together to repair damage from the battle. Jake realized that the wedding had been just the beginning of something much larger than either of them had imagined. Through their mental connection, Lyrelay shared her hopes for the future while Jake showed her his dreams of peace between their peoples. They both knew there would be more challenges ahead, but they also knew they would face those challenges together as partners and equals. The wedding night marked the end of 3 years of war and the beginning of a new age when humans and Zephyrians would explore the galaxy together instead of fighting each other. Jake had married an alien queen to save his people, but he had gained something even more valuable than peace. He had found a partner who understood him completely and would stand beside him no matter what dangers lay ahead. 6 months after the wedding, Jake and Lyra Lee had established their new home aboard a ship that combined human and Zephyrian technology. The vessel was called Unity, and it served as both their residence and the headquarters for the Joint Council that governed relations between their peoples. Jake stood in the command center, watching construction crews from both species working together to build the first integrated colony on New Haven Prime. The planet was beautiful with blue oceans and green continents that reminded him of Earth, but the cities being built there would be unlike anything either species had created alone. Lyra Lee entered the command center, and Jake felt her presence through their mental bond before he saw her. Living with constant telepathic connection had been difficult at first, but now he could not imagine being without it. They could share thoughts and emotions instantly, which made their partnership incredibly strong. The adjustment had not been easy for either of them. Jake sometimes felt overwhelmed by the intensity of Zephyrian emotions, while Lyra Lee struggled with human unpredictability and independence. But they had learned to balance their differences and find strength in their diversity. Amanda Clark had become Jake's chief of staff and helped manage the cultural challenges of integrating two very different species. She was still protective of Jake, but had grown to respect Queen Lyra Lee and understand the importance of their union. Her job now was to help other humans adapt to working with Zephyrian partners. Roy Chen ran the new Xenolinguistics department, where teams of humans and Zephyrians worked to improve communication between their peoples. He had discovered that many conflicts came from simple misunderstandings caused by language barriers. His work was helping to prevent future problems before they could start wars. The former battle zones had been transformed into centers of cooperation where humans and Zephyrians shared knowledge and resources. Medical teams from both species worked together to treat diseases that had once seemed impossible to cure. Engineers combined human durability with Zephyrian elegance to build structures that were both beautiful and practical. Jake maintained his military command, but now led integrated units that included both human and Zephyrian personnel. The combined forces were more effective than either species had been alone because they could use different strengths and abilities to solve problems. Training exercises that had once prepared for war now focused on exploration and protection of peaceful settlements. The personal relationship between Jake and Lyra Lee had grown from mutual respect into genuine love. They had learned to appreciate each other's cultures and find joy in their differences. Jake had adopted Zephyrian meditation practices that helped him manage their telepathic connection, while Lyra Lee embraced human customs like making individual decisions without consulting others first. Their daily routine included morning briefings where they reviewed reports from colonies and exploration missions. Jake would present human perspectives while Lyra Lee shared Zephyrian insights, and together they would make decisions that affected millions of lives across dozens of worlds. The most exciting development was the announcement that Lyra Lee was expecting their first child. The pregnancy was unprecedented because no one knew what to expect from a human and Zephyrian hybrid. Medical teams from both species were monitoring the situation carefully and providing the best care possible. Jake felt overwhelming joy through their mental bond when Lyra Lee first told him about the pregnancy. The child would represent the future of human and Zephyrian relations and would grow up in a universe where peace was normal instead of war. Their son or daughter would never know the hatred that had once divided their peoples. The pregnancy announcement was broadcast throughout both empires and received with celebration in most places. Some extremists on both sides still opposed the union, but they were vastly outnumbered by people who supported peace and cooperation. The child had already become a symbol of hope before it was even born. Jake and Lyra Lee spent their evenings planning for their child's future and the continuing expansion of their partnership. They had approved plans for joint exploration missions to distant galaxies where humans and Zephyrians would discover new worlds together. The universe was vast and full of wonders that neither species could explore alone. The final scene took